ozone is a gaseous chemical formed in nature from oxygen by photochemical reactions. About 21% of our atmosphere is filled with oxygen. Beyond the atmosphere, that is 25 kilometers above the surface of the earth, is the stratosphere, where the oxygen is converted to ozone and a layer of ozone is formed. This thin layer of ozone at the stratosphere protects the terrestrial and aquatic living forms on the surface of the earth by absorbing harmful ultraviolet radiations of the sunlight. Some of the chemical pollutants like chlorofluorocarbons can cause the depletion of ozone. Since this depletion can leak the harmful UV radiations to the surface of the earth, it is an environmental problem. Several international environmental laws are in place now to prevent this depletion and protect the ozone layer, which will ensure the protection of life on earth. In the troposphere, ozone can trap the heat and contribute to global warming, and at the ground level it can form smog at low temperatures. This way, ozone has both good and bad effects. We will now see in detail how the ozone layer protects life on earth and the consequences of ozone depletion. Ozone is formed from oxygen, and oxygen is formed by the photosynthetic organisms that can split water to hydrogen and oxygen using the energy of sunlight. Hydrogen is utilized by the plants to reduce carbon dioxide absorbed from the atmosphere to a carbohydrate in a multi-step reaction process. By this process of photosynthesis, plants produce food for themselves and also for the animals and the humans. Oxygen, a byproduct of photosynthesis, is released to the atmosphere, and in the stratosphere, that is 25 kilometers above the surface of the earth, oxygen is split into monooxygen when it absorbs the ultraviolet radiations below 280 nanometers present in the extraterrestrial sunlight. The highly reactive monooxygen then combines with a molecule of oxygen to form ozone. So, ozone is formed in the stratosphere in this manner. Ozone also absorbs the ultraviolet radiations between 280 to 315 nanometer of the extraterrestrial sunlight in the stratosphere, and then it splits to oxygen and monooxygen. Now, these photochemical conversions require high energy ultraviolet radiations available in the stratosphere. These reversible reactions that happen in nature maintain a certain ratio of oxygen to ozone in the stratosphere and effectively absorb the harmful UV radiations of the sunlight. This thin layer of ozone in the stratosphere protects the living forms on the surface of the earth from getting exposed to harmful UV radiations, especially between 280 to 315 nanometer present in the sunlight. During evolution, it took several million years for the photosynthetic organisms to build 21% of oxygen in the atmosphere. A few bacteria do photosynthesis without producing oxygen by taking hydrogen from compounds other than water. This is known as anoxygenic photosynthesis. The earliest photosynthetic organisms that could produce oxygen were cyanobacteria that grow in water. The early primitive plants, grouped as algae, are aquatic and can exist only in water. These primitive plants built up the oxygen concentration from 0 to 21%, and the ozone layer was formed. The terrestrial plants and later the terrestrial animals could occupy land only after the protection from solar UV radiation that was provided by oxygen and ozone. Solar radiation can be distinguished as terrestrial or global, and extraterrestrial. Global radiation is the sunlight received at the Earth's surface, and extraterrestrial radiation is the radiation that can be seen 25 kilometers above the surface of the Earth beyond the stratosphere. The ultraviolet part of the sunlight has three components: UVC 200 to 280 nanometers, UVB 280 to 315 nanometers, and UVA 315 to 400 nanometers. The extraterrestrial radiation beyond stratosphere has all the three components of ultraviolet, whereas the global radiation, that is the sunlight at the surface of the Earth, has no UVC, very little of UVB, and a large amount of UVA. This is after the filtration of ultraviolet radiation by oxygen and ozone present in the stratosphere. Beyond UVA are the visible radiations that can be split into 7 colors as in a rainbow. Solar ultraviolet radiation is divided into 3 parts on the basis of the biological effect of UV. UVC, that is 200 to 280 nanometer, is the most harmful radiation for the living organisms. This is called bactericidal radiation, since this can kill the bacteria. This radiation is useful for sterilization of solid surfaces. Artificial lamps that can produce UVC radiation are used in the hospitals for sterilizing the operation theatre. They are also used for sterilizing the tables in microbiology or tissue culture laboratories for preventing contamination. In water purifiers domestically used, the UVC lamps kill the bacteria present in water. UVC can kill not only the bacteria, but all the types of living cells, since it is absorbed by the DNA present in all living cells. Precaution is always taken not to get exposed to this radiation when they are in use in the form of artificial lights. A very small amount of UVB radiation is received at the global surface. All the living organisms have adapted to this small percentage, which is about 20% of the original UVB radiation. But anything in excess of this will be detrimental, as it will be discussed later. UVA radiation is absorbed to a very little extent by ozone, and almost 78% of this radiation reaches the global surface. Thus, UVA is not harmful to the living organisms. Natural layer of ozone is measured in terms of Dobson units. If all the ozone is brought down to the ground at 0 degree centigrade and 1 atmosphere pressure, then the thickness of this ozone layer is about 3 millimeters. This corresponds to 300 Dobson units, which is considered as the global average of ozone. It was first noticed in 1970 at Holly Bay Research Station at Antarctica that the global average of 300 Dobson units of ozone was not present in Antarctica, and this was noticed by the British Antarctica Survey. Ozone was lesser near the north and south poles and in the colder countries nearer to the poles like Canada and Siberia. Now, this depletion, which is termed as ozone hole, kept on expanding from 1980 to 1990. Over Antarctica, the measurement of ozone was 220 units in 1980 and 100 units in 1991. Both these measurements showed lesser amount of ozone than the natural average. How ozone is depleted? Now, the major chemical pollutants that deplete ozone are chlorofluorocarbons, which are used as refrigerants in refrigerators and air conditioners. Chlorofluorocarbons have 3 chlorine and 1 fluorine molecule attached to the carbon. When they are released to the atmosphere, they reach the stratosphere, undergo a photochemical cleavage by absorbing UV radiations, and then release a chlorine ion. This chlorine ion is highly reactive and reacts with ozone to form chlorine monoxide and oxygen. Chlorine monoxide is also reactive and combines with another ozone molecule to form chlorine dioxide and oxygen. This sets off a chain reaction of ozone destruction, because chlorine dioxide can also undergo photochemical cleavage by absorbing ultraviolet radiations to form chlorine ion again and oxygen. In addition to this, chlorine monoxide can react with monooxygen to form a chlorine ion and oxygen. Thus, one chlorine ion released in the stratosphere is capable of destroying several ozone molecules and convert them to oxygen. Besides chlorofluorocarbons, a few other chemicals are also capable of destroying ozone, like nitric oxide released from automobile exhausts. If we think about why the depletion is more at poles, then there are several reasons for the severe depletion of ozone, particularly at Antarctica. Because of long cold winters at Antarctica, where the temperatures can go as low as -85 to -90 degrees centigrade, the Antarctica air forms a polar vortex, which results in the formation of ice crystals at high altitude near stratosphere. Now, these are called polar stratospheric clouds, and ozone and chlorofluorocarbon are observed on the surface of the ice crystals. They crystallize together in these clouds. When the sun returns in spring, it accelerates the destruction of ozone by liberation of chlorine ions from the chlorofluorocarbons. This is the main reason for the destruction of ozone at the poles. Some more potential chemicals have been identified by the United Nations Environmental Programme for their ability to destroy ozone. These chemicals are hexachlorobutadiene, which is used as a solvent, N-propyl bromide, which is used as a solvent and feedstock, 6-bromomethoxyl naphthalene, which is used to make methyl bromide, a fumigant, then halon 1202, a chemical that is used as electric fire extinguisher. So, these are the potential chemicals that can also destroy ozone besides chlorofluorocarbons. We will now see why ozone is detrimental to life when it gets depleted. Since ozone absorbs UV radiation, particularly in the region of UVB 280 to 315 nanometers, the depletion of ozone will leak more of UVB radiation to the global surface from the extraterrestrial radiation. Excess of this UVB radiation is harmful to plants, animals and human beings. In plants, the excess of UVB decreases the rate of photosynthesis and inhibits growth, which results in low biomass productivity and the yield of plants. Excess of UVB also causes damage to DNA by dimer formation and also alters the primary and secondary metabolism in plants. If the plants are exposed to artificial UVB radiation, then the growth is inhibited. Inhibition of growth in cucumber cotyledons by artificial UVB radiation is shown here. Even if the ambient UVB that is present in the normal sunlight received at the global surface, then if this UVB radiation is excluded by appropriate filters, then the plants will show better growth. In other words, even the UVB radiation present in the normal sunlight causes the inhibition of growth to some extent. In humans, excess of UVB radiation affects the vision cycle. It can also damage skin by causing a disease which is called as erythema. In this disease, the blood vessels just below the skin swell and cause reddish spots on the skin. Under severe exposure, these dilated blood vessels may burst in and cause lesions on the skin. There is also a report of enhancement of skin cancer cases, particularly in cold countries, which has been linked to excess of UVB exposure due to the depletion of ozone. This way, ozone depletion can be harmful to all the living forms on this earth. Ozone layer in the stratosphere is a primary requirement for the existence of life on this earth. International environmental laws have been now framed to protect the natural level of ozone in the stratosphere. The first law, enacted in 1987 as Montreal Protocol, envisaged 50% ban on the use of chlorofluorocarbons. Later, in 1990, in London Conference, it was envisaged that 100% ban would be required to protect the ozone layer in the stratosphere. There are now positive signs of control by this ban on chlorofluorocarbons. Ozone depletion is dissimilar in different zones. Depletion in Arctic zone is not as extensive as in Antarctic. Temperate countries near to the poles experience the depletion of ozone more than the tropical countries near to the equator. It is estimated that healing of ozone may take about 50 years. Data of last 20 years show that the ozone decline has come down from 8% to 4% per decade.